Greetings, fellow Bible readers. Welcome to week 49 of our Bible read-through. This week we finish up 1 Corinthians, cover all of 2 Corinthians, Galatians, and Ephesians. As we look at these books, you'll want to notice and kind of watch out for similarities in theme between 2 Corinthians and Galatians, even though these two letters are very different in length and in purpose, as well as to some extent in content. There also are a number of overlaps in theme and thought, and so kind of watch and see if you can detect any overlap in the themes and thoughts, and maybe even a couple of themes and thoughts bleeding on into the book of Ephesians as well. So as we look at these books, we're going to notice that the book of 2 Corinthians is a book where Paul focuses on defending his ministry as a gospel herald. In Galatians, we're going to see Paul give a strong and vigorous defense of the gospel of faith in Jesus alone as how we are saved before God. And then the book of Ephesians is one of Paul's prison epistles, a letter that was written while he was in prison in Rome. And in that letter, Paul stresses the theme of unity. So let's get down to the details for each day. On day 1, as we finish up 1 Corinthians with chapters 14 through 16, you'll really want to just relish and enjoy chapter 15. It is the great resurrection chapter. In that chapter, the Apostle Paul lays out the case for the resurrection, and he not only does so in a very logically powerful way, but he also does it in a way that is very spiritually edifying, that builds up our faith. Then on day 2, as we look at 2 Corinthians chapters 1 through 5, in these opening chapters, notice how the Apostle Paul focuses on forgiveness and the ministry of forgiveness. And Paul really kind of weaves those two together, kind of wrapping up a church discipline situation that he had addressed back in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and now kind of bringing it full circle with forgiveness. Then on days 3 and 4, as we finish up the book of 2 Corinthians by looking at chapters 6 through 13, really in the second half of the book, Paul's defense of his ministry really dominates. You can kind of pick up some thoughts on that and some hints of it in the first 5 chapters, but really in these last couple of chapters, it really becomes the dominant theme and focus. And as Paul defends his ministry, notice that his defense of his ministry is not a personally driven thing. It's not about himself and making himself look good. Rather, that defense of the ministry is all about being concerned for those Corinthians, keeping them from falling into the false teachings of the super apostles who were opposing Paul's ministry. Then on day 5, as we look at Galatians chapters 1 through 4, notice Paul really display a great deal of zeal, both for the message of faith in Jesus alone as the way of salvation, as well as his zeal for the Galatians, his desire to pull them away from the false teaching that was afflicting them. And so those are two major thoughts that you can get out of those first 4 chapters of Galatians. Then on day 6, as we look at Galatians chapters 5 and 6 and Ephesians chapters 1 and 2, in the ending chapters of Galatians, notice how Paul stresses the freedom that we have in Christ Jesus and how that freedom is destroyed if you get rid of Christ. And then also notice in the opening chapters of Ephesians how the Apostle Paul stresses that it is in Christ that we have unity. And then finally on day 7, as we cover the remainder of Ephesians chapters 3 through 6, you'll notice that Paul starts to transition, and he goes from talking about the unity that we have that is founded in Christ Jesus to the exercise of that unity in our daily life. That unity we share by faith leads us to live in unity as Christians with one another by the way that we carry out our callings. And that's a good reminder to us that our unity as believers is not just simply to be something on paper. It's not just simply to be something that we talk about. It is to be something that we live and put into practice. That's all for this week. We'll see you next week.